Thank you. I'm so honored to be here in your beautiful country and to be at this conference. There we go. All right. So I read a lot of articles, and as I'm sure you do, about these gloom and doom articles about the terrible future of our profession, how we're, becoming rapidly irrelevant. And I just can't reconcile that with what I see in front of me here and what I see in my own country and in other countries I visited. Librarians are doing so many creative and amazing things to reach out to our patrons in ways that people never would have thought possible just 5 years ago. Okay, that's weird. So we're looking at, we're doing so many interesting and entrepreneurial and innovative things. We're rethinking how we can reach out to our patrons, whether it's in their classrooms, both online and in person, or even on the streets of New York. We're rethinking what it is to be a library and building spaces that allow our patrons not just to consume information, but also to create, to be creative. We're creating maker spaces where people can render 3D objects. We're allowing them to do, video production, video editing, create their own podcasts, all of these creative ventures in libraries. We're also creating amazing third spaces for our teens who are soon going to be the taxpayers who are funding our libraries. We're creating collections and events and also spaces where they feel comfortable being in the library and being with their friends. We're also rethinking what it means to be a library for our adult patrons, giving them the collections that they want to have and giving them the tools that they need to be successful in their lives. And we're doing all that while our budgets are being cut without letting go of our traditional library services, our reference desks, our books, our quiet study spaces, while we're expanding in so many exciting ways. And while there are all of these exciting, wonderful things that we're doing, I can't help but look at the things that haven't worked, the ideas that we haven't been able to make good on. For every wonderful idea, I see a graveyard out there of ideas that could have been amazingly successful in our libraries if only we'd executed them better. And probably one of the most obvious places, I think, to look is at the Web 2.0 realm and what libraries have done there. I mean, we've done a lot of great things, but you look online and there is just a graveyard of library blogs that have not been updated in 5 or more years. And I mean, I remember back in 2005 or 6, I kept hearing at conferences people saying, oh, every library should have a blog. Every library. And I think this graveyard comes from people thinking that they absolutely had to do this, even if there wasn't a specific need or population that they were really reaching out to. We also learned that wikis don't magically create collaboration. These tools aren't actually like magic wands. And for every brilliant wiki that still exists, there are probably 5 others that you get a page like this. Ooh, blank screen. That's unusual. Oh, okay. Well, I know what I was going to say on that slide, which is good. It was a picture of a podcast that hasn't been updated in a long time that was very popular and was created by a librarian who then left his job at that library. And, we have so many services like that that are run by one really enthusiastic person, and that's simply not sustainable. If they get too busy or they leave the job, we just let this thing go. And that's not how we should be running important services that are important to us and our patrons. I used to think when I first came into the profession that having a good idea was enough. But so often these things don't fail because the idea was bad. It's in how we actually implemented it. And we didn't implement it in a way that created buy-in or that was made to be sustainable beyond just the person who initiated the idea. So sometimes it's really about whether the fit is right. Sometimes, I know I've come back from conferences seeing amazing things that other libraries have done that weren't necessarily a right fit for my library. I remember in 2006, the Ann Arbor District Library in Michigan came out with this blog-based website. Their entire website was just a series of blogs, and their patrons were commenting, and it was so exciting to see, and all these libraries said, oh, we're going to do the same thing. But Ann Arbor, Michigan is a very unique population. It's a university town. People are very highly educated, very tech-savvy, and very civically minded. It's not necessarily going to work in the blue-collar town that I lived in Vermont a few years ago. You know, it's a different population, and we often think we can make that work in a place that is so incredibly different. Uh-oh. Problem reading the document. Uh-oh. Ooh, boy. Oh, dear. Okay, well, I'll just keep talking then. My next picture was of someone with a crystal ball. Sometimes we think we know our patrons better than we actually do. We make so many assumptions based upon our anecdotal evidence. You know, I had a colleague who questioned the fact that we were providing undergraduate instructional services the way we do because she said she talked to a student at the reference desk who'd had instruction 5 times that year. Well, that's one student. Should we really be making decisions based on the small bits of anecdotal evidence that we glean from working with individual students or patrons? You know, we really have to look beyond that and do actual assessments, really get to know our users. I'll be talking later in my other presentation today about embedding instructional services at users' points of need. And we can't do that if we don't know where our users are actually experiencing problems and needs. Thank you. And that kind of gets me to my next point. It's so easy to become so excited about a new technology or an idea that we feel like we have to do it now. And we can't see that maybe the timing isn't right, maybe our patrons actually haven't adopted this technology. I remember having a student in library school who wrote in a paper, oh, and we should like market RSS feeds to teenagers because they're all using RSS. And what I've seen of statistics of RSS, the uptake of RSS, shows that that could not be further from the truth. But sometimes we get so excited about something that we assume everyone's doing it. We should be doing it too. And we get that tunnel vision, and we can't see what our patrons need or how the novice user would experience the technology that we're so very into. We also need to look at how the things we want to do connect to our library's mission and goals. I'm on the tenure track right now, so I just wrote my annual review portfolio, and you know, everything that I did, I tried to relate back to either our university president's big initiatives or our library's strategic plan. When you tie something you're doing to your library's strategic plan or other major initiatives that your institution has, they're more likely to be taken seriously, and they're more likely to be funded and supported because they will be able to help the administrators to show how they are furthering those goals. So I think it's absolutely vital to look at what you want to do in light of the institution's mission and goals. Karen Schneider, who will be giving a keynote later and a talk right after this, she often talks about the differences between free as in beer and free as in kittens. With beer, you can just drink a free beer and you're done. With kittens, while they might be lovely, they can cost quite a bit in veterinary bills and destroyed furniture, etc. I've noticed that librarians tend to love free, and we underestimate the actual cost in terms of keeping something going. I'm at a library that is very big proponents of open source software, and we had looked at research guide technologies that were open source. But what we realized was that in paying for LibGuides based on our specific needs, the cost of paying for LibGuides was actually much lower than the cost of what we would need to do to both maintain and customize any open source tool to what we needed. So sometimes the cost of free is actually quite significant. How many of you write for a blog, whether it's a professional at work blog or a personal blog? Okay, so remember when you first started blogging, how amazingly exciting it was? I mean, I remember, I think I posted, in the first few months that I was blogging, I think I posted like every other day. I was just, so gung-ho for it. And then eventually the enthusiasm wears out, and then you're forcing yourself to do it, even if, and then things get in the way, you get busy, you have a child, you're on the tenure track, lots of things happen. And this is what has happened with so many things that we try to do. We don't plan for them in a way that's sustainable. Can you imagine planning for the reference desk saying, well, we'll just let the people who are most enthusiastic staff the desk when they feel like it. And this is what we do with, blogs at our libraries so often. We don't have a team around it. We don't schedule when things are going to happen, how we're going to maintain it and keep it going. Because the enthusiasm is not going to last forever. Eventually, the thing that we're thrilled about is just going to become another thing that we have to do. And as we all get busier and busier, those things that we're not excited about are going to fall by the wayside. And sometimes I think we give up too early. And I think that comes from expectations that are unrealistic. I think if you're really so gung-ho about an idea and go in expecting just great things to happen, it's very easy to very quickly become discouraged. I think if you go in with a realistic view, knowing that probably anything you do is going to need to be tweaked in the future, is not going to go perfectly, and you're going to have to, and it's going to be an iterative process of improvements and assessment, and it's not going to always be sexy and fun and amazingly successful. I think then it's much easier to keep something going and to improve it and make it what it could possibly be. And then there's timing. At my current library, I've been there about almost a year and a half. And when I got there, I was told that the most important thing I needed to do was build a culture of assessment around student learning. So that was what I did. Unfortunately, 2 months after I got there, my boss, the associate university librarian, and the university librarian left. But I kept on, pushing this change that I suddenly didn't actually have any support for. Timing is everything. When you don't have the right people or the right leadership, or everybody's focused on something else, it might not be the right time to make this happen. I just know that building a culture of assessment is something where change is going to be measured in geological time, probably. And that's okay. That's okay. I think we get so excited that we want something to happen now. But most of the time, we just have to chip away and take our little victories where we can. But timing really is everything. You can't create a culture of assessment without administrative support. And without that, I'm dead in the water. So for anyone who really wants to be a change leader, I would highly recommend looking at the business literature that's out there on change leadership. My personal sort of guru for change is John Kotter. Probably some of you have read his work in the past. In 1995, he wrote this brilliant article for Harvard Business Review called Leading Change, Why Transformation Efforts Fail. And in it, he discussed what he's seen from interviewing hundreds of businesses and consulting on change leadership in their institutions, what he's seen go wrong. And this is an 8-step process for actually creating sustainable change. And here's another way of looking at his change process. I have a presentation wiki. The link is going to be at the end of my talk, and I'll actually give you the link to this infographic because it's quite dense. Don't expect you to read it all now. Kotter, since that article was a runaway hit, has come out with numerous books further explicating his change model. And what I really like about it, so much of what I read in the change literature is about what the boss can do, what the CEO, the person at the head, the university librarian, the director can do to create change. but most of us are not directors and university librarians. And what I like about Cotter's model is that someone without positional authority can use these steps. So long as you have the tacit approval for what you're doing from administration, you can make this happen with his steps. At least I believe that. So now I'm going to talk about what we can do to create sustainable change, to create an environment in which change can happen. And first I'm going to talk about what administrators can do to sort of make that environment for their employees. And the first is to make sure that people feel comfortable questioning everything. There's so many things that we do at libraries that we just take for granted as being the norm because we've been doing them forever. Or maybe we tried something different 20 years ago and it didn't work, so now we're like, no, this is the way it has to be. We really need to be willing to question what we do, every bit of it. At your library, do you feel like people who are new actually feel comfortable questioning things and telling their bosses what they find just completely crazy? Whenever I have a new employee, I always ask them in the first few months, tell me what you think is crazy that we're doing. Because after a while, you don't see it anymore. You just get used to it, everything being what it is, and it's the norm. I was so lucky this summer to have a library school intern working with me on my instructional design team because I had this outside viewer who saw things completely differently than we did, and it was great to have her insights. We also need to look outward, and I think, we're talking yesterday about the news and how New Zealanders look outward a lot more than people in America. We tend to look at our own American news and you look at the whole world. And we need to do that as libraries too. We tend to look very inwardly because we're so busy and we're so focused on what we're doing. But we need to get out and be with our community and better understand their needs. Go to community forums, go to faculty meetings, go to student government meetings. I had the privilege this summer of working with faculty on assignment design, which is truly the holy grail if you're an instruction librarian, of being able to work with faculty when they're building their course. But it was wonderful because I got so many insights about how they view our library services because I was working with them at that micro level. It was just wonderful. It can be really difficult to tell your boss when they're doing something wrong, but a really good boss should encourage that. People at the top don't necessarily have the same insights that we do when we're working with students, faculty, patrons, whatever, on a day-to-day basis. I remember at my previous library, we had an evening and weekend circulation supervisor who probably knew more about how people used the library than any of us, because he was there at times when the library was getting the most use and when nobody else was there. And yet he wasn't at our staff meetings, and he wasn't included in things. A good leader should be pushing their employees to tell them things like that, to give them the insights of things that they notice, and to tell them when they're making a bad decision. The change literature is absolutely unanimous on one thing, and that is the importance of a clear, compelling, and shared vision. Without a shared vision in a library, there can be lots of things going on, but people aren't working towards a shared future, a specific future. In a great culture, every librarian, if you ask them what the vision of the institution is, would tell you something that is almost exactly the same as everyone else in that institution would. And having a vision doesn't mean you're actually constraining people. What it means is that everybody can create their own goals, but they know what they are working towards. Everybody is consistent in that. I was recently reading a blog post in Harvard Business Review that talked about the importance of collaboration and sort of the myth that exists about how innovation happens, how it's like this lone brilliant innovator, you know, this Steve Jobs type who is coming up with these great innovations, but the vast majority of innovations are happening in groups, in teams, and creating both informal and formal teams in an organization is absolutely vital to spurring creativity. I was about 2 years into my first job in the profession when I was told I had to share an office with someone, and I was far from thrilled about this because I'd had my own nice quiet office, and I was like, oh, this is going to be terrible. It was the best years probably of my career. I was so creative because the two of us worked together so well and had this great synergy where we could just bounce ideas off of each other all the time that, you know, maybe I wouldn't have even had I been in a room by myself. So collaboration is absolutely vital. Also developing partnerships outside of our libraries. I'm so lucky at Portland State, we're part of the Orbis Cascade Alliance, which is this amazing consortium of libraries in the Pacific Northwest, which started, you know, mainly to get good deals on databases and to share books amongst the consortium. But now we're doing things like collaborative technical services, which is going to free up staff at all of our libraries to do other things. Also, we're looking at doing collaborative assessment work, which is great because so many of our libraries don't have people with expertise in assessment and data analysis and survey design. So to bring all of that expertise together is an amazing thing. And that doesn't mean just partnering with libraries. There might be other organizations in our communities that we could partner with. I'm currently working with our tutoring center at our library, at our university, to partner to help support students. And you know, there's so many synergies there because we're all there to support student success. Creating a risk-tolerant culture is also absolutely vital. If you want your employees to feel comfortable trying things. In places where people feel like they are going to be beaten up for taking a risk and failing, their imagination will immediately be constrained by that reality. I was so lucky in my first job to work at a library where my director was just completely supportive of taking risks and trying new things. And when something I tried, which was an embedded librarian service, when it failed, she didn't say, oh, that's terrible, or beat me up over it, or anything like that. What we did was look at it, do a post-mortem. We looked at what went wrong, what we learned about our students because of that failure, and what we could do differently. You know, if we don't try something, we're not going to learn from it. So making people feel comfortable failing is absolutely vital. Also, creating really transformative change takes time, and it might mean lowering our expectations for a while, our performance goals for a while. At my previous job, my director was very focused on being able to show the provost that that our instruction stats were constantly going up. But to do something really innovative might make our instruction stats not go up. They might go down. But being so focused on these performance goals like that makes it very hard to do something innovative because you can't take the time to do it. So taking a long view and looking at long-term goals instead of just what we need to do this year is vital to doing something really innovative. And this seems very obvious, but it's been shown in study after study that flat organizations are the ones where innovation happens, and empowering employees with real decision-making clout is what really matters in creating innovative organizations. You know, if people feel like they constantly have to ask permission or aren't trusted, it's a morale killer, and it's an innovation killer. If people feel like they need to go through a million steps to be able to try something, you know, it's going to make it very hard for them to want to do that. And finally, for our administrators, time, another one that seems really obvious, but, you know, I've had so many people tell me, you know, my boss keeps piling on more and more initiatives that I need to be a part of, and they want me to be on this committee or that committee, and I'm drowning. I think the best thing an employer can do to make their employees feel valued is to be protective of their time. That's one thing I am obsessed with my employees, is making sure they feel like they have the time to do their work and still reflect and be creative and come up with new things and experiment with new technologies, because I don't want them to just be workhorses. You know, sometimes we get so bogged down that we don't even have the time to learn new things and be creative. Oh, whoops, one more. And finally, everything we do should be tied to assessment. Any new initiative should come with performance measures. How you'll know if it's a success or a failure. You can't know that without knowing what success and failure look like. And also, making decisions based on data makes the decisions that administrators are making seem much less capricious, because you can show why you made that actual decision. So what if we work in a place where we don't have that kind of a culture? That doesn't mean that we can't create sustainable change. There is a lot that we as people without positional authority can do to make change successful. And first, we can build networks. We can learn from others. You know, I know some administrators think that going on Twitter and Facebook and things like that is totally not work-related. And for some people, it is totally not work-related. But I have built an amazing network through blogging and Twitter that I can call upon when I need help, when I have a question. When I was looking at research guide technologies and I wanted to see what libraries were using different technologies, I could just go on Twitter because I had taken and get help, because I had taken the time to build a network. And when you build that network, you have access to so much expertise outside of your library. It's absolutely worth the time. And we really know our patrons. Earlier, I talked about how so much we do is based upon assumptions. Truly understanding our patrons is the key to creating services that actually meet their needs. This is a screenshot of the undergraduate research project at the University of Rochester in New York. This was the first big ethnographic study that a library had undertaken to really observe their patrons, how they use the library, how they use services, what their ideal library looks like, to really deeply understand their patrons. This year, we're going to be doing an ethnographic study at my library of returning students, so non-traditional age students, to understand the differences in how they use our resources, how they come to terms with the gap between what they knew as libraries when they were in school last and what they are now, and so that we can better embed help at their points of need. We also build a sense of urgency, and that doesn't mean, you know, scaring people with gloom and doom predictions, but we do need to speak to people's hearts to get them truly on board with change in our library with our colleagues. It's one thing to get buy-in. You know, people might intellectually think your idea is good, but that doesn't necessarily mean they want to put energy towards making it happen. You have to understand what motivates your colleagues, what they're passionate about, and speak to those passions to really make them feel like there's some urgency with creating this change. I am terrible at politics. I have to say this is probably one of my personal weakest areas, but it's absolutely essential to pushing change through an institution. At my last library, it was very easy. You know, you'd go to the director with an idea, she'd like it or not, and that was kind of how things happened. But at my current library, we're tenure-track faculty, so we're very big on faculty governance, and it really means you have to get all of your colleagues on board. Going straight to the university librarian is the best way to really piss off your colleagues. So it's about creating a team who are going to help you push that change forward and choosing the right people for that team, not just the people who are the most available, you know, the people who like you the best, but the ones who you know are actually influential in your library. I have one colleague who she's not, you know, she hasn't been there the longest, and she's not a boss of anybody at all, but she carries a lot of weight with what she says, and people trust her. And having her on board with an idea makes a huge difference. We also have clear goals. I think when we sometimes run headlong into new initiatives, we don't really go with a clear sense of what success would look like. And you absolutely have to know that. Last year I created, we started using web conferencing software to provide research instruction to some of our distance learners. And we hadn't, before we started doing it, we hadn't actually defined what success would look like. So we ended up finding, we had a very dismal turnout for it, other than for the workshops that I did for Zotero and Mendeley, the citation management tools. But my colleagues kept wanting to do this. They kept thinking if they kept doing it, people would catch on. But we had done lots of marketing. And you know, it had gotten to a point where I was ready to mothball the project, other than the webinars that were successful. But without originally saying, what is our tolerance point? At what point do we say we're done with this? Because of that, it was very hard for some people to let go of that service. We also have to communicate about the change a lot. I know Karen Schneider in her next talk, at least from the abstract, it looks like she's talking about resistance to change in people's frames of reference, and why people might resist change. Communicating about the change is absolutely vital, and communicating about it often. People might reject or try to sabotage change if they don't feel like they've been heard, if they don't feel like their concerns have been heard. And it's not just about making sure people have been heard. Sometimes their concerns are actually quite legitimate, and taking them into account in your design of your new service might actually make a huge difference. We also need to plan for short-term wins. If there's, you know, sometimes things like building a culture of assessment is a long, hard slog. It's a lot of work and a lot of steps. But I think engineering short-term successes early on makes a lot of sense. With creating a culture of assessment, choosing assessment projects first that are easy to do, that are going to give people a sense of self-efficacy, that are going to give them a sense that assessment is something that they can learn from, is really important. It's important to keep them going. We also need to have a long-term plan for keeping these things going, like I talked about with a blog. Once people are not enthusiastic about it, you need to know how you're going to keep it going, how you're going to staff it, who's going to maintain software or whatever of your free software that you've adopted. There's so much that goes into keeping something going, and we often don't think about that early on. And finally, we assess in a meaningful way. There's no way that we can know what we need to change about a service without doing assessment. And I know assessment is a topic that most people, when they hear it, are just like, ugh, awful. Even at an information literacy conference I was at recently, somebody asked people to say the adjectives that they associate with assessment, and the most positive one was necessary. I won't even mention the rest. They were really, really depressing. But assessment provides so much value and insight. It tells you what is wrong with what you're doing and what needs to be fixed. But assessment needs to also be done in a meaningful way. I see so many libraries doing assessment just so that they can say that they're doing assessment. You know, a satisfaction survey after an instruction session, great, they liked me. I'm so happy. I honestly don't care if students like me. If they learn something, awesome. They can hate me, great. But a satisfaction survey isn't going to tell you what they learned. And we also anchor change in the culture, which means that what we've done is becomes just what we do at the library, like checking out books or working at the reference desk. It's just something that we do, that service that we're providing. And that takes significant commitment from administration to reduce any barriers to change, to make sure change is properly resourced. I mean, it was something like a culture of assessment. People need time to do assessment. That's critical. Finding ways to inculcate new employees, and also making sure that the change doesn't just rest on one person's shoulders. Because when that person leaves, you want to know that what you've created is going to live on. I always feel so gratified when I hear from colleagues at my previous job that some of the small services that I've created, that they're still doing them. And that's when you know you've really been successful. And if it doesn't work, don't give up. Assess and see if maybe there are changes you can make, and learn from it. If it is truly something that needs to be mothballed, learn from it. Do a post-mortem. See what you can get from that failure, because with every failure, there is so much learning to be had. Thank you so much for being here, for having me be here, and good luck with your change initiatives. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Meredith. I feel ready to go back to work and start instigating change in a whole new way. We do have 2 microphones in the auditorium, and we have time for some questions or comments for Meredith. So, hands up. Funnily enough, I have one. I've been thinking a bit about shared vision. Oh, you do have one. Carry on.
Yeah. Hi, Meredith. I'm Ruth McCacker, and I'm with the Alexander Turnbull Library at the National Library. I was really interested in you talking about empowering staff to make mistakes and learn from them. Mm-hmm. Wondered if you could talk about that a little bit more in terms of how we keep people comfortable knowing that while they're making mistakes, they're not actually disadvantaging our customers or, hurting our own reputation, because our staff take that so seriously.
Right. And I think, and that is a big thing. And I know with my embedded librarian project, I was very concerned with stopping doing something like that because the faculty came to expect it over the year that I was trying it. I think couching things as a pilot project is very important so that people know, we are experimenting with this. Like when we were doing our webinars last year, we said, we're experimenting with this. We really want your feedback so that we can know how to make this successful, whether this is something the community needs. I think it's important when you're trying new things to make it clear to the community that this may or may not be something that you're going to be continuing, because I think dropping a service sometimes can be have very negative repercussions. But on the other hand, we can't do everything. We can't keep adding services and services that aren't having the return on investment.
One down the front here. Oh, and one at the back, so. We'll go there first. Who's first?
Kia ora, thanks very much. I don't know whether this is working. Is it working?
Yeah.
Good? Okay, cool. One of the things that I'm kind of interested in, it was around your comments about time, giving staff the time or permission. Is there a lurking paradox there, in your experience, that by people taking time to reflect, create, innovate, you actually find that you've got a whole lot more time? Do you want to comment on that?
That you have more time because you've
by taking time, there's a paradox there, really, I think.
I think in the long term, that's absolutely true, because you can't come up with new ways of doing things that might be time-saving in the long run without taking the time to learn and experiment. This year at my library, we're trying a new model of freshman instruction, which was such a huge part of our instruction program, but was also taking a lot of time away from upper level and graduate instruction. So we're now developing learning objects and doing more of a train-the-trainer approach, which I think is actually more meaningful in the long run. But, you know, it does take time now that we need to devote to that, and my bosses have been wonderful about giving us the time to develop these ideas and develop learning objects and work with the faculty, and take away some of our other responsibilities, like I'm not doing any reference desk shifts for this year, so that I can devote time to this. And in the long run, it's actually going to be a great time saver for our library faculty, who can then devote more time to instruction at the upper levels, which is something that they're very passionate about. So yeah, I completely agree that by giving people time, it can actually save time in the long run, but maybe not always.
There's one down here. Yep.
Can
we have a microphone down here?
Kia ora, Meredith.
Thank you.
My name's Lisa. I'm the Any Questions service coach at the National Library. And I was really struck by what you said about how we tend to assess customer satisfaction all the time. And we do that too. I was wondering if you had any great ideas about how you move beyond that customer satisfaction survey to actually gathering data on what people have learned, other than just saying, you know, what did you learn, and breaking it down.
Well, I think the most authentic kinds of assessment we can do is actually looking at student work, is looking at the products. And this year we're actually going to be looking at student portfolios at the end of their freshman year. They have a portfolio from their freshman inquiry courses that we can then assess using a rubric that we're developing, an information literacy rubric. So that'll give us a sense of, you know, how well students have mastered certain skills. Because it's more important to us to know that they've mastered the skills than to actually know for sure where they got those skills, whether they got them from the library or from their professor or from their best friend. Doesn't really matter to me. It just matters that we know that students are doing better, that their skills are improving over the course of a year. And what we'd like to do ultimately is do that assessment as well as maybe some kind of pre-test, post-test, to better understand, see where students are when they start and where they are at the end. Yeah. Sure.
I was interested in, Alison Dobie, Auckland Libraries. I was interested in your comments about making blogs sustainable and the number of dead blogs. And when we were thinking this through, the wisdom that we went with was that readers prefer blogs that have a clear personality of the writer.
Yeah.
And so that's the path that we followed. But is that still the wisdom, or are there other ways to make blogs sustainable which don't rely just on one person but give an institutional or other view?
Well, I think blogs don't have to rely on one person to still have that human, personal tone. I think having a team of bloggers actually works beautifully. And there was one library I saw recently. Most blogs I see, they don't have like the face of the person who's writing the blog post. But this one group blog that I saw, and I really wish I remembered what academic library it was, but they have a team of bloggers, and the person's face, the author's face, is on every blog post. And I thought that just adds such a much more personal tone to the blog. I mean, obviously the way they write is important too, but I think a group blog can be very personal and very human as long as they're putting themselves into it.
Any more questions?
Oh, one over there.
Oh, thank you.
Hey Meredith.
Hi.
Hey, so I'm John Campbell Live. I just wanted to ask, you have a point, you brought up that point about playing the whole political game.
Yes.
I just wanted to see whether you have experiences with staff who you know have something great to add to your library, but don't see that as legible and think, nah, I have to be honest, I have to be true to my character. Well, what's do you kind of get my point? You look at me like
people who don't feel like they can contribute, or
no, because there's a point you brought up about just knowing how to play the game politically.
right.
Yeah, but there's people out there who won't see that as a point, because they think if I play the game politically, I'm not being true, or I'm not being honest.
I'm not being true to myself.
What would you say to a staff member who might have that point of view?
Well, honestly, I have that point of view, so I share that. But I think there's a difference between playing a game and knowing who you need to talk to and get on board with your idea for it to be successful. I don't think that means that you have to suck up to people. I think it just means that you need to be able to sell your idea effectively. And if you're passionate enough about it, and you need to do it in the right way, talking to the right people. In my library, unfortunately, that means going to every individual's office, because that seems to be how change happens there. But you need to know that. You need to know how it works in your institution and how you're going to create a convincing case. And in some cases, that might be go to your director first. But that's just knowing. It's not a game. It's just knowing how things work, what your culture is. But yeah, I feel you on that. Yes, one over there.
Kia ora, Meredith. My name is Anand, and I'm a member of the SLIS committee.
Huh.
I'm very pleased that you've been able to come over to New Zealand and share your views with us.
Thank you.
I don't have a question, but I just have a comment to make from following your blog on and off. Just a couple of things. First is, thank you for being what I would consider to be the voice of common sense for us. And I think that might be possibly because you've come from outside and joined a profession. And the second thing is that I've really been struck by the courage you've displayed in your blog when you've had opposition or opposing views from some of the readers of your blog, and you've stuck to your point. That's really been inspirational. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. That's really touched. Thank you all. One more?
We're still on time, so this way.
Oh, good. I usually go over.
I'm Moira Fraser from Moira Fraser Consulting now. There's been a bit of a chat on Twitter about success and that notion of framing what success for a piece of work looks like, and that it might change as you go along. Could you just talk about some techniques that you use to define what success looks like?
Okay. Well, I think it's important to be clear from the outset. Like you said, it can change over time, but I think it's important to come from a place where you're defining what you see as being a successful implementation of your service, program, technology, whatever, what that would look like. And that may change over time. I have never done something in a library setting where I haven't been surprised by what has come from it. Where I think, oh, this is going to be a runaway success and so many people are going to love it, and then they don't, and vice versa. So I think, coming in with a vision of what success looks like, but also having that flexibility of saying, okay, this doesn't look exactly like what we thought, and maybe we need to change our expectations, maybe we need to change the service, but learning from it and asking those questions, you know, doing assessment and saying, what do we learn from this? What can we change in the service? Or do we need to stop the service? Or do we need to change what we view as success? I think that's really important.